He had a modern service. He had a festival of the Jewish Reformation in which he dedicated the temple on July 17th, 1810. And it included a German sermon, a choir, congregations singing in German, group prayers in unison. And he wore a Protestant clerical garb. Well, there it all is. It's right there. That's Reformed Judaism, just almost bang, born in a minute. And that's almost still doing that in Reformed Judaism today everywhere. I mean, it's almost exactly the same. It hasn't changed an iota. And this one individual in Germany did it all right there in almost one go. So he so we have not long afterwards an actual Reformed prayer book is developed, edited and written by other West German Jews, mostly for use in the Hamburg temple, which is now being repeated throughout large parts of Germany. So let's start with that issue here. I'm going to look at Israel Jacobson's address in a moment. Oh my God, we're coming to. Well, I'll keep you a bit, 10 minutes longer than I usually do. Wait to make up for the waste of time that I did earlier. I think we have to keep moving. Why, first of all, would they call it a temple? What does that mean? What is that saying? Rebirth? I don't think so. I mean, I know my answer because I'm asking a rhetorical question. But the answer which I'm seeking, you may be right in your answer, but the answer which I'm looking for is what? The implication is that we are no longer going to consider that the Jerusalem temple is central to our religion. Now, previously, synagogues were like, well, it actually is a Greek word. I think Sino means getting together, assembling, and Gog has to do with teaching in some way, I think, or study. So a study center or a teaching center, but it was not ever called a temple. Throughout the whole 1,800 years of Jewish history prior to this, maybe 2,000 years going back before the fall of the temple. Paul goes around the synagogue while the temple is still standing, so there are synagogues even before the fall of the temple. Where was the temple for Judaism? In Jerusalem. Now, there was a northern temple in the Old Testament, which the prophets criticized. Where was that? Any of you have done Old Testament. It was, if you've ever read Amos, Amos is in the northern temple at a place called Bethel, which literally means house of God. It's the southern part of the northern kingdom. Beth is house of, El is God. And they say in Amos, "Go home, prophet, we don't want you in the royal temple of the north. You're a southerner, you belong in the south. Prophesy in the south, get out of our temples, we don't want you here." So there's a northern temple in Bethel. But when the north was destroyed and the south flourished, and there was only one tribe as such really left, except for the Levites and the priestly groups, that was the tribe of Judah, which the south represented. So then all of those left were no longer Israelites, which is why probably it's odd to call the country Israel today. They were Judahites or Judeans, which is where the word Jew comes from, which I explained to you earlier in the class. So the southern temple was the only temple that remained, and that was at Jerusalem. So the Davidic Southern Temple was for Judeans and their descendants, Jews, the only recognized temple. I told you the issue of the temple was going to get more and more center stage as time goes on. I think in 1967 the Israelis didn't understand it was a socialist government. They didn't understand the symbol of things. They were more living in a world of left-wing ideology and didn't really understand the trappings that we're talking about here of tradition and the effect tradition has on people. And you know, just the other day, a fellow went up on the Temple Mount and said that we have to stop the ban, one of the extreme right-wing parties that's wants to be in the government, we have to stop the ban of Jews on the temple. What's the ban of Jews on the Temple Mount in present day Israel? Not just because the Muslims have it, but the rabbinic ban was what? They were afraid, I think this is ridiculous, they were, again, some hoople, they were sort of, the reason given was that they might inadvertently step on the Holy of Holies, therefore they shouldn't go on the Temple Mount. They were forbidden. Well, how are they ever going to find the Holy of Holies if they don't go up and look for it so they won't step on it? I mean, it's such a ludicrous rationale that it just boggles the mind. But it worked. It's worked until the present day. Anyway, this extreme religious group was saying, no, we mustn't do this anymore. We must allow Jews to go on the Temple Mount, and the implication was that they want to start, you know, changing the situation drastically. And I think there is a lot of right-wing thinking in that regard, as well as evangelical thinking in that regard. And I think that these issues are going to come more and more center stage in your lifetimes. I don't know what the outcome will be. To my mind, I quoted Shakespeare last time, there's a time when taken as flood leads on to fortune. To my mind, they missed the time because they didn't have an ideologically highly formed groundwork in these areas, so they didn't know what to do when the temple miraculously fell into their hands. So they just gave it back to the Muslims, which was kind of them to do, but you know, it isn't something very well thought out to have done. In any event, here the temple is wherever we are. And that's why when you go into a Reformed congregation, have you ever gone into a Reformed synagogue? No, you haven't, because it doesn't exist. You've only gone into Reformed temples.